What happens when a decorated Army colonel is denied his mission? Not on a battlefield, but at an airport gate. When Colonel Marcus Ellison was stopped from escorting a fallen soldier home, the refusal sparked more than outrage. It exposed the hidden biases, broken policies, and quiet failures behind the scenes. Caught on camera, shared by millions. What unfolded next forced a nation to choose: follow the script or finally stand for the dignity every uniform deserves. The terminal was loud with the usual churn of early evening travel. Kids ran ahead of exhausted parents. Business travelers stood absorbed in their screens. And the intercom buzzed with gate changes no one quite understood. But when Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Ellison stepped into the building, everything seemed to move in slow motion. Wearing his full-dress uniform, the dark blue sheen crisp and unwrinkled, Ellison carried more than just a government-issued duffel. He carried the burden of a soldier who never made it home. Private Nathaniel Brooks, age 20, whose flag-draped casket sat quietly beneath the belly of a waiting aircraft. The kind of mission no one signs up for, but that every soldier knows might one day come. Ellison had done this before, twice. Escorting remains was never routine, but the duty was sacred. Today, though, something felt different. He stepped up to the airline counter, offered his military ID and travel papers, and waited. The agent, a woman in her 30s with a neat bun and a name tag that read Alyssa, scanned the documents. Her face changed, not dramatically, just enough. A flicker of hesitation, a pause too long to be normal. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. Then came the phrase that froze time. "Sir, there seems to be an issue with your flight." Ellison blinked, confused. "I'm escorting a fallen soldier. My orders are here." He spoke evenly, calmly, more for her benefit than his. "I understand," she said, eyes darting to a coworker, "but there's a security policy we have to follow." In that moment, a cascade of silent calculations began behind her eyes. A mix of uncertainty, discomfort, and something harder to name. Implicit bias doesn't wear a uniform, but it leaves footprints. She didn't mean harm, but she also didn't stop to think. The policy wasn't clear. The situation wasn't normal. And under pressure, she defaulted to fear over empathy. Ellison stood tall, not with defiance, but with the weight of someone who had served too long to be dismissed without cause. Behind him, the line grew. Whispers followed. Phones began to rise. No one quite knew what was happening, but everyone could feel it. A soldier in uniform, a coffin on the tarmac, and a door that wouldn't open. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Ellison didn't move. He stood firm, not out of pride, but out of principle. His documents were valid, his orders were clear, his mission sacred. Yet somehow the agent in front of him was treating this like a routine ticketing issue. Behind the counter, Alyssa avoided eye contact as she whispered to a supervisor, an older man with thinning hair and a rumpled name tag that read Curtis. Curtis approached slowly, exuding the kind of false calm people adopt when they're about to say something no one wants to hear. "We're sorry for the inconvenience, sir," he said, "but this is a matter of protocol. The system flagged your ticket. We can't override it at this time." Ellison remained composed. "I've flown under these circumstances before. There's no protocol that prevents military escort travel." Curtis shifted on his feet. "It's a high-alert day. We have to follow extra security checks. Nothing personal." Nothing personal. The words settled like dust, coating the space between them. That phrase often means the opposite. When people can't or won't explain their decisions, they fall back on what sounds official. But Ellison had heard it all before. Overseas, in policy rooms, even in briefings. Sometimes it wasn't what people did. It was what they didn't do, like look you in the eye or say your name. And now the line behind him was starting to notice. A young man in cargo shorts leaned to his girlfriend. "Isn't he, like, military?" A woman with a toddler glanced up from her phone. "Wait, did they just deny that soldier?" It didn't take long. One voice broke the silence. "Excuse me," someone called out. "Is there a problem with his clearance?" The speaker was an older man wearing a faded Army airborne cap, weathered hands, deep-set eyes. A veteran, no doubt. He stepped forward, eyes locked on the supervisor. "I've flown hundreds of times in uniform, son. Never once seen a soldier denied an escort mission." Curtis tried to answer, but the Marine cut him off. So is this a protocol thing, or is it a judgment call? The tension cracked like static. People nearby leaned in. Two passengers lifted their phones, quietly filming. A woman in a denim jacket crossed her arms. Another tugged at her husband's sleeve. "This isn't right," she whispered. "Look at him. He's carrying someone home." At first, the staff pretended not to hear. But social media doesn't wait for permission. The young woman from earlier stepped into view again. Her voice was soft but resolute. "I'm live streaming," she said, phone tilted toward Ellison. "I just want people to see what's happening here." Ellison met her gaze briefly. He didn't ask for help, but she offered it anyway. That's how momentum starts. Not with outrage, but with awareness. A few rows back, a college-aged man in a hoodie began typing rapidly into his phone. Within moments, hashtags started appearing. A soldier denied. An escort refused. The words moved faster than the staff could respond. Then came the ripple. Passengers weren't just watching anymore. They were narrating. One woman muttered into her phone, "He's literally standing there with the flag on his chest, and they won't let him through?" Another voice, louder this time, "Is it because of his uniform or because of his skin?" That landed differently. The question hung in the air, spoken not as accusation, but as observation. The kind people make when a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The discomfort on Curtis's face said more than words could. Phones kept recording. Comments poured in. "This is why people don't trust systems. This is what disrespect looks like. Let him fly." Someone tapped Ellison on the arm gently. It was the young woman again. "Sir, I know you're not looking for attention, but people care. This matters." Ellison gave a slight nod. He understood. In another era, this would have gone unnoticed. But not today. Today, silence was a choice people refused to make. Curtis looked overwhelmed now. He stepped back, muttering something to Alyssa, who retreated behind the frosted glass door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." A moment later, the airport speaker chimed overhead. "Flight 412 to Denver has been delayed. We apologize for the inconvenience." The announcement barely registered. Near the windows, a teenage girl gasped, "Oh my God, Mom! He's trending already! It's on my feed!" Her phone screen showed a post with thousands of likes. "Black Army officer denied flight while escorting fallen soldier." The caption below it read, "This is how we treat our heroes?" A buzz rolled through the crowd. Travelers now watched more than just the terminal. They watched each other, watched a moment turn into a movement. Curtis returned, but his posture had changed. His shoulders were tight, eyes scanning the crowd, jaw set in damage control. A manager in a navy vest flanked him now, offering a forced smile. "Colonel Ellison, we've resolved the error. We're happy to rebook you on a new flight. First class, of course." But the apology came too late. By now, a dozen voices had joined the first. A quiet resistance had turned into collective refusal. The agent's retreat, the live stream, the hashtags, it wasn't just about a ticket. It was about what happens when institutions fail to see the people in front of them. And Ellison? He never raised his voice, never stepped out of line. He just stood his ground. That was all it took. The casket still waited on the tarmac, and the story had just taken off. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Ellison didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence said more than outrage ever could. Around him, the terminal pulsed with rising energy. What began as confusion had now become a quiet storm. Cell phones weren't just cameras. They were witnesses. Social media wasn't just an outlet. It was an accelerant. A college student posted a short clip. "Uniformed soldier denied boarding while escorting a fallen comrade." Within minutes, it had been reposted by a popular military family page. Then a veteran-led advocacy group. Then a local news reporter who happened to be flying through the same airport. The caption read simply, "This is what institutional failure looks like." The public didn't wait for full context. It rarely does. The emotional truth was clear enough. A black officer, a flag-draped coffin, a refusal that didn't make sense. By the time airport staff returned with a half-hearted apology and an offer to rebook the flight, the moment had already broken free from the terminal. It was trending across 3 major platforms. One tweet under the hashtag number "Let Him Fly" had already passed 50,000 shares. And then the floodgates opened. Posts from strangers poured in, former service members, airline employees, Gold Star families. They weren't just angry, they were disappointed. That emotion cut deeper. People didn't want platitudes or PR statements. They wanted clarity. They wanted accountability. The manager at the gate, a tall man in a corporate-issued vest, was sweating now. He spoke in a rehearsed tone, offering Ellison an upgrade and expedited boarding. But the words landed flat. "First class," Ellison said quietly, as if that's the fix. Passengers nearby murmured. Some nodded. Others folded their arms. A woman holding a baby pulled out her phone and began recording again. "Sir," the manager said, trying to reset the tone, "we sincerely apologize. It was a system error." The same excuse Ellison had heard before. Overseas, in Washington, in rooms where people made decisions that never touched the ground. The system didn't make this decision. A person did. That was the heart of it. Nearby, a young woman opened her live stream again. Her voice trembled slightly but remained clear. "He's not asking for special treatment. He's asking for basic respect." A retired Marine from earlier added his voice. "This ain't a system glitch. It's a failure of character." At that, the crowd responded. Soft claps, a few cheers, but mostly silence. The kind that says we're listening. Then a new ripple. A man in an airport security uniform rushed over to the gate manager and handed him a phone. The manager took one look and blanched. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The headline said it all. Decorated officer denied while escorting fallen soldier. Airline responds, too late. The clip embedded beneath showed Ellison standing calmly while others argued around him. No shouting, no theatrics, just quiet resistance. Another alert came through. A spokesperson from the Department of Defense issued a brief statement acknowledging awareness of the incident. Moments later, a second update. The Pentagon had authorized an alternate transport for both Colonel Ellison and Private Brooks. Commercial travel was no longer on the table. Then, through the glass doors near the security checkpoint, another figure appeared. Major Russell Trent, mid-40s, direct from Joint Base Andrews. He walked with purpose. His uniform made people step back. Respect followed him like a shadow. He stopped in front of Ellison and saluted. "Sir, we're here to take you and the soldier home." Ellison returned the salute, then turned toward the crowd. "Thank you," he said. "Not to the staff, but to the passengers, to the ones who didn't look away." Trent glanced at the gate manager. "This situation will be documented." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The airport felt suspended in time. A story that began with quiet disrespect had ended in public reckoning. Passengers stood as Ellison walked past, some placing hands over hearts, others nodding. Phones still recorded, but not for attention now, for memory. That night, the airline's social accounts were overrun. Thousands of comments, hundreds of reposts of the same 3-minute clip. Corporate PR tried to catch up, releasing a short apology, citing confusion over internal procedures, and promising an investigation. But the internet wasn't buying it. Veterans groups announced formal complaints. Travel watchdogs cited lack of protocol transparency. Airline customer service satisfaction numbers began to drop. Media outlets didn't just run the video, they dissected it. Talk shows featured commentary. Military family organizations demanded mandatory training and federal oversight. A senator issued a public statement. Another called for hearings. The fallout had begun, but Ellison didn't seek fallout. He wasn't chasing justice for himself. He just wanted one thing, to complete the mission, to bring a young man home with dignity. He didn't want to be the face of a movement. But in a world that often overlooks quiet strength, his stillness had sparked something louder than outrage. Respect. And that, more than anything, was what had been missing all along. Colonel Marcus Ellison stood still as the world around him shifted. The apology was too late. The viral momentum had already transformed this moment from a clerical mistake into a national conversation. And just when it seemed like the airline was finally ready to hand him a boarding pass, the doors at the far end of the terminal opened with authority. 2 uniformed officers stepped through. One wore the dark service blues of the U.S. Army, his gait unmistakable, confident, deliberate, and unhurried. His badge identified him as Major Russell Trent, a senior transport coordinator from the Department of the Army. At his side walked Captain Leah Moreno, a logistics officer stationed at Dover. People instinctively made space. It wasn't fear, it was something older, something deeper. Respect. Major Trent approached Ellison and extended his hand. "Sir, I've been sent to ensure you and Private Brooks make it home properly. Your military transport is ready. You'll be flying direct, no commercial carriers involved." Ellison accepted the handshake. "Copy that, Major." The airline manager stepped forward, flustered, his voice uneven. "We just resolved the system error. We're happy to move Colonel Ellison to first class. The plane's ready for boarding." Trent didn't even look at him. "That won't be necessary." Captain Moreno handed the manager a folded letter, a formal military transport order, authorizing immediate reassignment of travel responsibilities. The manager glanced at the document. His shoulders sagged. He nodded but said nothing. This was no longer about a booking issue. This was about control, and the airline had officially lost it. Major Trent turned toward the growing crowd. "Thank you all for your concern. The Army appreciates the support shown here today, but we'll take it from here." As the two officers moved into escort position, the crowd responded, not with cheers or applause, but with reverent silence. Some placed hands over their hearts. Others simply nodded, acknowledging the gravity of what had unfolded. This wasn't a feel-good ending. It was a correction, one the public had demanded, one the military had now enforced. Ellison adjusted his uniform jacket and glanced toward the gate he would no longer walk through. The supervisor who had denied him earlier was nowhere to be seen. The original ticketing agent had disappeared behind the service door, her absence almost louder than her presence had been. In another corner of the terminal, a father explained to his son what had just happened. A teenager updated a viral post with the newest development. Military steps in to take over soldiers' denied mission. Justice delivered, not by the airline, but by the uniform. Screenshots of the Army's involvement began circulating. News outlets updated their headlines. Some included the full video, others added commentary. The tone had shifted from shock to analysis. How could something like this happen? What policies failed? What training was missing? But Ellison wasn't focused on commentary. He had done his part. He had endured the sting of silence and the weight of dignity denied. He had stood still, so the country could see itself more clearly. Captain Moreno looked over. "Private Brooks' remains are secure. Transport is prepped. Wheels up in 20. Ellison nodded, understood. As they exited the terminal, the chatter behind them quieted. Not out of fatigue, but reverence. The mission was back on track, but the ripple effects were only just beginning. Across the country, military families followed the story. Some wrote messages, others shared their own airport encounters, stories of delays, of disrespect, of confusion and disinterest. What was once isolated now felt collective. Airline executives scrambled. Meetings were called. Media consultants advised against defensive language. Statements were revised. Legal teams looped in. Someone floated the idea of reaching out to veterans groups. But the problem wasn't just public relations. It was policy, or the lack of one. Many airlines had informal practices for handling military escorts. Few had formalized procedures. Even fewer had mandatory training on how to treat service members during missions like this. And in the vacuum of clear standards, individual judgment often stepped in. And that was the real risk. Not the public backlash, not even the stock dip, but the reality that frontline staff were making decisions in emotionally charged, symbolically loaded situations without the tools to do it right. Ellison boarded the military vehicle waiting outside. This wasn't his first time carrying a brother home, but it was the first time the mission had been interrupted by bureaucracy and bias, and then restored by visibility and collective action. He didn't need a statement. He didn't want a headline. All he needed was to finish what he started. And now, thanks to the voices in that terminal and the command that stepped in, he finally could. By the time Colonel Marcus Ellison and Private Nathaniel Brooks were wheels up on a private military flight, the storm on the ground had only grown. Across social platforms, the video clips showing Ellison's calm refusal and the crowd's support had now been stitched together, shared, and dissected by millions. Headlines shifted from disbelief to outrage, from soldier denied duty to airline scrambles after national backlash. Cable news picked up the story. Talk shows debated it. Morning anchors repeated what passengers had recorded, frame by frame, voice by voice. Ellison didn't speak to the press. He was focused on his duty, but he didn't need to speak. The silence in the terminal had already said enough. The airline issued a formal statement within 24 hours. It was a regrettable misunderstanding. We are reviewing internal procedures. The employees involved have been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. But the damage was already done. A National Veterans Alliance filed a formal complaint, citing a pattern of mistreatment and calling for mandatory policies to protect military escorts in transit. Several high-profile politicians released public statements condemning the airline's conduct and calling for legislative oversight. In a matter of days, the airline's stock dipped 4.3%. A trending hashtag encouraged boycotts. Their customer service lines flooded with complaints, many not just about this incident, but others like it. People shared stories that had gone unnoticed. Delays, disrespect, dismissals. What had been a spark had become a spotlight. Internally, airline executives moved fast. They brought in consultants, reviewed federal travel guidance for military remains, and discovered what many suspected. They had no standardized protocol. While federal guidelines existed for the handling of fallen soldiers, commercial airlines were only loosely aligned. Each carrier interpreted procedures differently. Most relied on employee discretion, leaving room for hesitation, inconsistency, and unconscious bias. And when discretion met pressure, judgment often failed. Training gaps became the next point of scrutiny. Diversity and sensitivity programs, once seen as checkboxes, were now under review. Staff had been trained on technical systems, but few had been prepared to handle emotionally charged moments with national weight. This wasn't just about policy, it was about culture. Critics pointed to the behavior of the original gate agent, not openly hostile, not overtly disrespectful, but distant, unsure, performative. Her forced smile, the need to whisper to a coworker, the reliance on security policy without specificity. Each moment added weight to the perception of something deeper, a culture of avoidance, a failure to see people, not just paperwork. The company's leadership made a second statement 3 days later. The CEO appeared on camera, visibly shaken. We failed, and for that, we are accountable. Not only to Colonel Ellison and Private Brooks' family, but to every service member and passenger who trusts us to do better. We are announcing immediate changes, including formalized protocols for all military escorts, mandatory training on respectful handling of duty-related travel, and the creation of a military travel task force to work directly with veteran service organizations. But for many, the apology felt late. The public had already moved from outrage to expectation. Now people weren't just angry. They wanted change. They wanted timelines, policy updates, proof that this wouldn't happen again. Meanwhile, Ellison completed the journey. In a small town in Georgia, he stood with the family of Private Nathaniel Brooks as the young man's body was laid to rest. He offered a flag, a salute, and a final quiet vow that the soldier's dignity had been defended, both in the skies and on the ground. He didn't seek attention, but he understood its value now. The incident wasn't about him, not fully. It was about a broken moment that revealed a deeper system flaw, about how easily respect can be denied, and how fragile dignity becomes when left to interpretation. Ellison returned to base a few days later. No press, no spotlight, just the routine hum of duty. But across boardrooms and congressional offices, his silence still echoed. And in airports across the country, gate agents began to notice what had changed. Not everything, but something. In the days that followed, the country moved on. News cycles spun forward. Trends changed. But the story of Colonel Marcus Ellison and Private Nathaniel Brooks left a mark. Not because it ended with applause, but because it started with silence and ended with accountability. Ellison never asked to become a symbol. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rally a crowd. He stood quietly when it mattered, and others stood with him. That is the power of collective recognition. A young woman live-streamed when she could have looked away. A retired Marine spoke when it was easier to stay quiet. Strangers recorded, reposted, and amplified not for spectacle, but for justice. And in doing so, they turned a quiet refusal into a national reckoning. The airline changed its policy. Other carriers took notice. Veteran groups gained ground on long-standing demands for uniform protocols and better training. Legislation was drafted to require clear procedures for military escort travel. Military families, who for too long had relied on hope over certainty, finally saw movement. But beyond policy, something deeper shifted. People began to ask better questions about who gets to make decisions under pressure, about how unconscious judgments can ripple into public consequences, about the difference between following a rule and honoring a human. This wasn't just about an airline mistake. It was about the fragile boundary between indifference and dignity, a boundary that exists in every workplace, every institution, every interaction. Respect shouldn't require a uniform to be earned. It shouldn't need cameras to be enforced. And it should never depend on whether a moment goes viral. Yet in this moment, the visibility mattered, because silence allows repetition, and attention forces a choice. Colonel Ellison finished his mission. Private Brooks was laid to rest with honor. But the real question remained, would the country carry that same standard forward, in terminals, in offices, in policies, in people? Because justice isn't just a response to what's broken. It's a commitment to seeing, listening, and acting before someone else has to stand alone to prove their worth. And when we stand together, dignity doesn't need to fight its way to the front. It's already there, waiting to be honored.